I was out there one day. I was by myself on the south end of the Dunedin Causeway, and I stopped 4 guys fishing on a boat. Just do a fisheries check. Then I get their 4 of their IDs. I run them, and one of the guys has got a warrant. And when you're in a situation like that, you're tied up right alongside of them. So they're hearing the radio traffic coming across the radio. So now it's 4 against 1, and I'm tied up to him. So when I asked him to step on the boat, he says, why? I said, well, I just need to talk to you. He goes, I'm not stepping on your boat. So now the guy definitely knows what's up. And the boat was a pretty decent boat. So I thought for a second, I looked at the guy, the captain or the owner of the boat. I said, I'm going to be real blunt with you. Here's the deal. I said, he's got a warrant. He's going to step on my boat. And if not, I'm going to drop the throttles. I'm going to drive your boat and this boat right up on that rocky shoreline right there. And those deputies right there and I are going to arrest him. So I said, those are your choices.
This is 56, a Pinellas County Sheriff's Office podcast. I'm Ricky Butler with Laura Sullivan and Ashley Cooley. We are really excited today to have Chief Deputy Dave Danzig as our guest on 56. He has always been a great friend to PR and all the things we're doing as long as he's been around, so we're excited to have him to talk to number 2. I guess he's there's probably an Austin Powers joke there, but he is the second highest ranking person we've ever had on the podcast, of course, behind the sheriff. So we're happy to have you, Chief. Thanks for coming. We're going to talk about, of course, that origin story, tell some stories along the way, hopefully talk about some leadership stuff. But before all that, Ashley has a question. It's all yours.
You can get rid of one mildly inconvenient thing in the world. What is it?
Wow. Mm-hmm. Mildly inconvenient thing. Do I go first? I don't know the rules.
Can they be people?
Yeah. That's what came to my mind right away.
Mildly.
Like, nope, I can't say that on the record.
Yeah, mildly.
As long as it's mildly and it's not like all the murderers or anything like that.
Mildly inconvenient.
Yeah,
there's no order to it. It's just whoever comes up with one.
Yeah, I'm going to get rid of allergies.
Solid.
Mine in particular, but if I can get rid of allergies all over the world, no more sniffles.
Yeah, I was going to say lines. Like, I hate waiting in line.
Okay.
Like a line at the bank or a line at the... Nobody goes to banks anymore, but when they went to banks.
When I used to go to the bank.
Yeah, amusement parks,
stores.
things like that, grocery stores.
Yeah.
So is that
sounds
no lines for the world or no lines just for you?
No,
it's
for the
just
world,
gonna be
for everybody.
chaos?
No,
Yeah.
for everybody. You just,
So it's like whoever's strongest gets there first?
no, just for everybody. Just lines are just inconvenient. I think we're living such a world now where you're used to stuff at your fingertips and on your phone or wherever, and all of a sudden you hit a line and you're like, well, I wasn't anticipating this.
Yeah, this is inconvenient.
Why am I waiting in line? I could just order this from my phone. Or
Right.
Yeah.
You do. Yeah. I mean, especially at Chick-fil-A. Like Chick-fil-A in particular. Like,
yeah.
Well, what
They
actually
can rock a line.
They can. They can. But what happens is you can literally order on your phone and then park in a parking spot, and they bring it out to you with pleasure.
They do.
But then you can order and then stay in line anyway. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
All right, I'm off that tirade. I'm still thinking because there's so many things.
You're still stuck on the people you want to get rid of.
Yeah. Mildly inconvenient.
Mine would be mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
they
for
love,
sure.
They
for
love
sure.
me.
Yeah.
Makes being outdoors not so
Tough.
great.
What would the dragonflies eat, though?
Doesn't
Not
sound like
your
my
problem.
problem.
So, dragonflies eat mosquitoes? I didn't. I'm learning
See,
here.
You're learning here.
All right.
Didn't know we had David Attenborough on the podcast.
Yeah.
Law enforcement and nature show.
Yeah. I think that there are, and this might be way too deep for this, but I think there are some aspects of social media that I could eliminate and live without, and it would probably be, gosh, it's a mild inconvenience for us because we are trying to put out good information. So I guess the idea of it is people, but it's not a particular person. I guess people in general that just have no interest in like research and learning actual information, and they just dive in.
Right. I was just thinking, like, when people don't watch the entire video,
Right.
and then they decide to comment, and it's like,
Right.
if you just watch the whole thing, you would have that answer you're looking for.
It's not a really good answer, but that's what came to mind, and it's mildly inconvenient for us, and I think it should be mildly inconvenient for everybody that cares about, facts and stuff.
All right.
Yeah, that's my answer. I'm sticking to it.
So we got mosquitoes on one end and people not commenting on before reviewing on the other. Broad spectrum.
But
Well-
that would have worldwide implications. That would have much bigger implications than just social media.
I
If you
know.
got people to think before they acted and to
Yeah.
read and research before they commented.
Yeah, it's
and
really not mild anyway, but
Yeah,
that's
but that's actually pretty big.
I was starting to think about things that just annoy me,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it's specific to us. So
I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like it's mild, but if it were gone, its effect would be
Huge.
immense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That was a good one.
that was good.
All right. Cool.
All right,
All
tell
right.
us your life story, Chief.
Life story. Where to begin? Where do you want to start?
No, so where'd you come from? How'd you get down here? How'd you end up at the sheriff's office? That's how we usually start.
So
How did you get
I grew up in Northern Virginia. Was born and raised in Fairfax County, Virginia. Was there up through high school. So my brother, who works here, as you guys know, we come from a police background family or a law enforcement family. We always kind of joke that law enforcement's been our family business. So some people, you know, their parents own a business or a storefront or name it, and the kids end up taking it over. We kind of view our upbringing that way. So our father was a Fairfax County police officer. So he started up there in 1968 and was a police officer from 68 to 88. So we grew up in that culture and grew up with it in Virginia. Our mother worked as a civilian in the police department. She was a dispatcher. She worked in records. She had a lot of different roles in the police department up there. So that's where we came from. We came from a police family, and our dad retired in 1988. So we've always had a take-home cruiser in the driveway. And some of my earliest memories of it as a child growing up and going to school was in the police car. My dad would drive us to school in the cruiser and occasionally pull somebody over in the cruiser.
While you were with him?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, back then. So that's kind of how it started. And I knew early on that I wanted to be in law enforcement.
Law enforcement is even part of your very, very early childhood, right? When you were
For
like
sure.
2 years old?
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
funny story right here at the beginning. When I was being potty trained as a youngster, way back in the day, the reward that my father had arranged if I could complete potty training and give up the diaper was I get to go for a ride in a marked car. So there was an officer by the name of June Boyle at the time that worked the district that we lived in, and June came over and got me in the cruiser, and I got to sit up front and go for a ride around the block because I had been potty trained. So so my brother, he's a few years younger than me. He got a little bit better of a deal. So when he was being potty trained, if he was able to complete the potty training, he got to go sit in one of their new helicopters. They just got in the flight unit.
Wow.
What?
Didn't get to go fly in it, but he
Right.
got to go sit in it. So I got the cruiser ride, and he got
The younger sibling
helicopter.
always gets
Yeah.
like the benefits. They do.
Yeah,
I
for
wouldn't
sure.
know, but I've heard that.
Yeah. I'm an oldest. So
Yeah.
They always get the better
I'm
stuff.
a youngest. I can vouch for it.
Always better.
So that's kind of how it started for me. It's I didn't really consider anything else. Thinking back to elementary and middle school and up into high school, I'd always planned on going into law enforcement, and quite frankly, had planned on joining the Fairfax County Police Department, going to work up there. And then my grandparents moved here in the 70s, so we'd been coming down to the Tampa Bay area, down to South Pasadena, St. Pete Beach, the Seminole area for vacations over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated high school, was going to college up there. My parents are divorced, so my mother had relocated down here with my brother. They were living down here, so I came down here for Christmas break in 1994. And while I was down here, my mom had applied for a job here at the sheriff's office, and she'd just gotten hired as at the time, I think it was a clerk 4, which is like a secretary. So she was telling me about the sheriff's office and said that, and in Virginia, the sheriff's office up there just does the jail and courts and things like that. So she was telling me about the sheriff's office here, and she says, it's really like the Fairfax County Police Department, but then add in the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department. They really kind of do everything here, from road patrol to the jail to investigations. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, cool. So I came down for that Christmas break, and I said, hey, you think I could do a ride-along? So she said, yeah. I talked to the captain's secretary, and the captain's secretary said you could do a ride-along. So she brought home some paperwork. So I had to get out a map. For those of you that are younger, it's a piece of paper that had like lines on it, directions. So
But
got out a map, yeah. I had to look up how to get to the 10750 Alberton Road here in Largo. So I looked it up, and she had arranged for this ride-along. So I drove over here on a Friday night, and I walked in the lobby of the old building, sat down, I said, hey, I'm here for a ride-along. And then long behold, Joe Manning, who's retired from here, came through the door. He was a corporal. And Joe, just as a side note, is now the chief of police. He's retired from his chief of police up in Sevierville, Tennessee.
Okay.
So he walks through the door and says, "Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you." So we went out and went for a ride along, and I was just blown away by the agency. It was a nice warm night. It was beautiful weather. We were busy. We went on a bunch of calls. We went to dinner with him and his sergeant. They were talking about working here. We really just talked about the agency. Gave me, walked me around a little bit. So I was done with the ride along and was super impressed with the agency. And I left, went back up to Virginia after Christmas break. And right as I got there, where I was living was in Radford, Virginia, which is in the southwest part of the state. I was going to college there. And we had an ice storm right when I got back. So the whole town's frozen over. And that was the first year that the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office had done a calendar. And if you remember that calendar, the first one, it was one of our old Caprice cruisers out at the Bel Air Causeway boat ramp. And the sun was setting behind it, and there was palm trees, and you could see the intercoastal. So I took that back, and I had it hanging on the wall where I was living. When it was happened to be beside a window, and looking out that window, there was an ice storm. And my roommates and I sat there and looked at that window for a week and watched cars slide down and crash during the ice storm.
Oh.
So I'm sitting there looking at that picture, and I'm looking at the ice, and I said, if I'm going to do policing for a career, which I want to do, I said, there's got to be a better way than doing it up here in the cold. So I sold everything I owned when the semester ended, and threw my clothes in my Nissan Sentra, and off to Florida I came. So
now you said you went on a ride along. So how old were you when you came down?
I was 20.
Okay, so I assume you'd done ride alongs and things with Fairfax as well.
I had. I was a police explorer up there.
Okay.
I'd been in the Explorer program, which the Explorer program really solidified for me about my career choice. I was pretty certain I wanted to be a police officer growing up or a deputy. And then once I got into the Explorer program, I did some ride-alongs as an explorer. I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted to work in an office, and I wanted something with variety, something that was different every day. And that's what law enforcement is. No 2 days are ever the same. It's not a predictable job. So that's what really drew me to it. I wanted to work outdoors. Now, my job now, I work a lot inside.
Right.
I wanted to work outdoors.
Right, and get into it.
Yeah.
So you load up the Nissan Sentra, you come down. Had you applied at that point, or what was the plan? You're just going to come stay with your mom?
Another story. So I get down here. Obviously, my mom knows I'm coming. I get down here, and then she had done a little checking for me, and at the time, we weren't hiring pre-certified. You had to be certified to work here as a patrol deputy. So I had found out that the academy was through St. Pete College, or St. Pete Junior College at the time, which was the All-State Center. So I got down here on a Friday after school got out. So Monday morning I get up, I get dressed, I get the map out again, I look up where the All-State Center is, and I drive down there. I walk through the door, I park, visitors spot out front, I walk in, I find the office for the academy. I walk in, I said, "Hey, I'm Dave Danzig, I'm here from Virginia, and I want to go to the police academy. I guess I can sign up and do that." So they were super nice, but they gave me like a weird look. They're like, "Well, you just drove here from Virginia?" I said, "Well, I drove here Friday." I said, "This is Monday." But yeah, I said, I guess I have to go to the I guess I have to go to the academy. I don't know where do I sign up? Like, is there a sign-in sheet? What do I do here? Right? She goes, "Well, have you been through PASS yet?" No, I'm familiar with what PASS is. She goes, "It's the police applicant screening service. And you have to go through that before you go to the academy." I said, "Great. Where is that? Is that next door? To where do I go to do that? I'm going to go sign up, and I'll be back. I'm going to go to the academy." Mm-hmm. She says, "It's up on Druid Road in Clearwater at the time." I'm like, "Perfect." Get out the old map again. So she says, "You have to go through them first." So I leave. As I'm driving up to PASS, I get pulled over on Missouri Avenue for speeding. Clearwater police. Clearwater officer walks up and says, "Hey, how's it going? I just got here. I'm from Virginia. I'm trying to find this PASS place on Druid Road." And he goes, "Oh, you want to be a police officer?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I work for Clearwater?" I said, "Maybe. I'm just trying to find the PASS place so I can get signed up. I want to start the academy." "There's no problem. I'll be right back." And he comes back up with a ticket. So I got a ticket on the way to the PASS office.
That's some BS.
You're
Yeah,
like,
I've been
"I'm
in Florida
working for
like
Clearwater."
3 days. Yeah, 4 days. So
Welcome to Florida.
Wow.
yeah, so I go to the PASS office and I walk in. I'm like, "Hey, I want to be a police officer." And
But not in Clearwater.
Yeah.
not in Clearwater.
I was
yeah.
like,
And
not
actually,
Clearwater.
I was actually surprisingly enough. I mean, I was actually impressed by the officer because he was driving a Mustang,
Oh.
and it was like a slick topped Mustang, one of the old fastback 5.0 Mustangs, and it was a Clearwater police one. And he got me. I was speeding. I think it was 50 some odd and a 40. I forget what it was. It was like 17 over, I think. But But he came zipping up behind me in the Mustang, and after, even though I got the ticket, I was upset with that. But I was like, man, that was a cool car. It was a Mustang. We didn't have those in Virginia. I was like, that's super cool. So I went to the pass office, make a long story short, and then I started filling out the paperwork, and there was a waiting list even then just to get through the pass process. So it took me almost a year. I didn't get into the academy until May of 96. And then I started here in October of 96. So I went through the academy, and then as the academy was nearing end, Clearwater offered me a job. So initially, even though I'd gotten a ticket, initially started with Clearwater. And when I say started, I went to an orientation day and had taken the position. And then at the time, I was going through the process here. And then I got home after that orientation day, and this is in the answering machine days, pre-cell phone days. And I had a message from Human Resources here, and I said, hey, we'd like to offer you a job at the sheriff's office. And then I called Clearwater and said I was going to come here. So then I started here. It was October 1st of 96.
Wow. And was the academy easy for you?
Yeah, it was challenging.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I wouldn't say easy. I mean, you have to put the work into it. You know, like it's, I don't think it's easy for anybody. I mean, you have to study and things. And in that time that I was waiting to go to the academy, I took a job as a server. I was working at Leverox in Madeira Beach. So I worked pretty much full time serving until I could get into the academy. So I saved money doing that. And I was living with my mom at the time. Mm-hmm. So when I went to the academy, I was fortunate enough I didn't have to work. I just went to the academy full time. Mm-hmm. And there were some classmates of mine that were trying to balance that with a family and balance that with work. I didn't have to do that, so I had the time to dedicate to it. But I remember it was challenging. I mean, the physical parts of it and the studying, and back then the state exam was a written exam. You had to go over to the Tampa Convention Center and take it, and people came in from all over the state. It was like a big deal.
So I guess also, like, obviously you did some ride-alongs, had some knowledge with your dad and everything. You know, was it what you expected?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Policing is a great profession. It's it's the greatest show on earth. You see things, you see the best in people, the worst in people, and it was definitely what I expected, for sure. And I was excited going through the academy. I couldn't wait to get out and get started. And I was like a kid in a candy store, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I knew early on that, I didn't have any regrets in this career field. And I was beyond excited to come to work here at the sheriff's office. And it's much like everybody that says it comes on now, is just the opportunities here. We do so much and have so much, and there's so many opportunities here to move around the agency. And that's what I was most excited about, compared to a smaller agency, just all the specialized units we had. And I remember starting as a 21-year-old, remember thinking, I'm going to do everything here. I'm going to touch, where do you want to go? Everywhere. Yeah. I want to stop everywhere and see everything. I was just that excited about it.
So you graduate the academy, everything goes well, start FTO. How was that?
Yeah, so FTO was good. I had good FTOs. We had just a year prior had merged with the city of Dunedin. So my first FTO was a guy by the name of Mike Anthony, and he was a Dunedin officer for years. So he'd only been with us for a year, but he had a ton of experience, and he was just an old school street cop, just knew how to be a cop and taught you how to be a cop and how to investigate and how to think things through and how to talk to people and how to solve crimes and investigate. So then I had Kurt Romanowski for phase 2, and we worked up in Dunedin, and he was another just an investigator. Nothing went to CID when we were working together. He was like, we got a call. Okay, yep, you're going to investigate that. I'm like, well, no, should I do a report and send it to the detective division? He goes, yeah, when you're on your own, but when you're with me, we're going to figure this out. So we worked some cases that should have gone, as a recruit, some cases that should have gone to CID that we worked all the way through. So those two guys really taught me at the beginning, like how to be a cop and how to do it, how to think things through, how to investigate, how to turn over rocks, how to research. Back then we didn't have the laptops in the cars. We had the old data terminals. So research was kind of old school. You had to go to a data terminal at one of the stations and look stuff up, and you had to do a lot of shoe leather type police work. It wasn't all cameras and technology like it is now. So it was good. I got through field training, and then when I got out, I was assigned to evening shift down here in the south part of the county when I got out.
Ashley, do you have something?
I was just going to say CID, Criminal Investigation Division.
Yes, okay. Sorry, Criminal Investigation Division, yes, CID. Okay. So a lot of times the way that it works is the cases that require follow-up now, and even back then, the deputies will take a report, and if there's follow-up to be done or there's no suspects or You're waiting on forensic evidence to come back or prints. The deputies will take the initial report, and then they'll refer it up to the detective division. The detective will get it. They'll be assigned to an area. They'll get it. They'll review it. They'll get the prints. They'll do the follow-up, the homework on it, if you will, and try to solve it. So with Kurt, it was, no, you're not. We're not doing that. He goes, we're going to keep it, and you're going to do the work on it and go knock on the doors and put the work in behind it. So, I was with him for a couple of weeks. I think I was with him for, it might have been a month now, I forget, 3-4 weeks. And we had a couple burglaries early on, and he had me work the burglaries all the way through. And we ended up solving them, which was interesting. They were kids in the neighborhood, and we got prints back. And it really opened up my eyes to that process.
So you make it out of FTO, you're on your own. You have a memorable first call or arrest?
Yeah, so my first arrest is a memorable one, which I'll never forget. It's the only time I've ever arrested somebody for this. So I was still in the program. So my first arrest was before I got out of the program.
Okay.
I'm still in the program, and I'm working down in Lellman. And back then we had a street crimes unit at the time. It was the Omega Squad. So there was a fight over at a trailer park in East Lellman. So we all get over there. I was with my FTO, and my regular FTO was off. I was with another FTO, like a substitute, if you will. So we get over there, and the fight is what it was purported to be, or reported to be. It was pretty much broken up. So we get over there, and me being the new guy, I collect everybody's IDs and get everybody's names. Let me run everybody real quick. So I run this woman through the terminal, and it pops that she's got a warrant. So this is the first time I had seen this. This is a warrant. This is cool. So I'm thinking, this is going to be a mass murder. I got, got a warrant. This is cool. So those things at the times were hard to read. So I saw that it was a failure to appear warrant. So I'm scrolling through the screen. It was like an old calculator type screen. And I looked down, and eventually I came to the charge, and the charge was failure to appear for cat running at large. So I'm like, okay. So I get out, and I tell my FTO, I said, hey, she's got a 60, which is a police term for a warrant, like 56 is for me. I was like, she's got a 60. He's like, oh, cool. What's it for? I said, cat running at large. He goes, what? I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know. It's a failure to appear. So I went over and told this poor woman. I said, do you own a cat? And she goes, yeah, several. I said, did you get a ticket for your cat being on the loose? She goes, yeah. I said, did you pay it? She goes, well, no. I said, well, the bad news is you got a warrant. I said, you got to go to jail. And she goes, for my cat being out? I said, well, fortunately, yeah. I said, your bond's $113. And so then, of course, being new, I'm like, all, Joe Friday-ish, if you will. Bam, put your hands behind your back, and, went through the whole double locking of the cuffs and, the whole thing. So I drove her to jail for cat running at large. So.
How does that even happen?
How do you get a ticket for that?
What was the cat doing?
I don't know.
Running. That's all a cat needs
running,
to do.
It was at large. I don't know. It was like a big deal, I guess, at the time.
Oh my.
And I've never seen that charge since, and I don't think that's a statistical category that we capture that I'm aware of.
I would imagine not.
That's kind of like a gateway crime, leading on to homicides
cat
and things like that. Yeah.
So that was the first time I ever personally arrested somebody. I was the guy on that one. I'm like, wow, all right.
It was me.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And she's like, that bastard.
Yeah. Yeah. I should
trying to
go
let
in
my
and look
cat
that
out.
up and see whatever happened to her. I don't know if she
Well, she probably went
led
on to
a
commit
life of
much more
crime.
serious crimes now.
life of crime.
Yeah.
Or maybe it intervened in her and the cat's life at an early stage, and now the cat became a home cat and know that it can't be on the run anymore. I don't know.
Got domesticated.
Got domesticated and started using its litter pan. I don't
Can't turn his life around.
Turn its life around.
I hope she's listening right now.
Yeah, I don't remember her name, which is sad.
If you
too.
are, call in.
Yeah. Call in.
Be a guest on the 56 podcast.
582-6200. Yeah. That's awesome.
Turning lives around first week on the job.
The cat turned. I can't get over the cat turning his life around.
That's crazy.
It's domesticated now.
Stop the catnip.
Yeah.
Well, what else? What else in that time? I mean, any other good stories? Your firsts? Any colossal screw ups? Did you crash any cars?
Yeah, I wrecked a few cars.
Yeah.
Back then, I used to, I tell the deputies now, you're probably not going to wreck a car around here that somebody hasn't wrecked a car like that before.
And what kind of cruisers? Did they have the Caprices then when you started? Or what were you driving?
So my first car was a 1988 Dodge Diplomat.
All right.
If you can believe that. It had an AM radio and crank windows. And the first time I went to drive
Isn't that our classic car now?
Yeah, it
One
is,
of our
yeah.
classic cars?
Yeah.
It looks
Sure
just
is.
like that.
Yep.
And the first time I went to drive it, there was a little bit of rain coming down, and I turned on the windshield wipers, and the driver's side one worked. The passenger one did not. So I'm like, this is interesting. So I only had that car for just a little bit, and then I moved into a Crown Vic, and we had at the time had just absorbed Madeira Beach Police Department, so they had some Crown Vics. So they had taken their Crown Vics and repainted them with our logo. So it had the old city light package in it, but it had our logo on it. And that car had a lot of miles on it, and it burnt oil. So when you accelerated, it would leave you a smoke trail behind you. It was kind of cool. It's
like
the
a James
Batmobile,
Bond thing, yeah.
like a James Bond thing. Yeah. So that car had carpeting. It had been the captain's car or something at one point. So down there, so it had carpeting and it had a power seat, which were luxury items at the time. It didn't have the plastic floor.
Right.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I ended up wrecking that car. I had an issue back early on with ghost riding. Like you jump out of the car, forget to put it in park. It's called ghost riding.
Uh-huh.
No.
And you look back and the car's rolling away, and you're like, oh. So I'll be right back. I got to go retrieve my car, and then we'll carry on with the enforcement action of the hour here. Yeah. So I did that a couple times, which happens.
Yeah, it happens.
It happens. Yeah, you get a little caught up. Now, the new Tahoes, is a spoiler alert, if you jump out at 5 miles an hour, it automatically slams into park for you.
Instead of another car, like what you would do.
Correct.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
That I don't know why GM hasn't hired you to kind of do some messaging on that.
Yeah,
You know?
that's nice. I popped my door the other day, pulling up to the gas pumps. I just popped it before it came to a complete stop in the Tahoe, and it locked the brakes up. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. Nice feature.
As you hit your head on the A-pillar.
Yeah.
Just about, yeah. Nice feature.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
The Danzig feature.
For sure, yeah. So I was in patrol for a while, a couple of years. I worked predominantly evenings. I worked midnights. I worked out on the Gandy on midnights for a shift, which was a lot of fun. Gandy back then, and yeah, I guess so now to a certain degree, a midnight shift was like the Wild West back then. It was just a lot of traffic between Tampa and Pinellas, a lot of people out there at night doing drugs and doing things, and we had racers, and that was a fun shift. And then I became an FTO, so that's kind of a funny story. I was just walking down the hallway one day, and Sergeant Picardi was the FTO coordinator, and he always thought he had myself and another deputy confused from when we started. So he always thought my name was John. So he stopped me one day. He goes, John. I said, hey, Sarge, what's going on? He goes, you want to be an FTO? Sure. He goes, all right, great. You got to recruit this afternoon. He'll be in at 3 o'clock. I said, okay, perfect. So that's how I became an FTO. So I recruit that afternoon, come in, and I'm like, all right, perfect. So I did FTO for a while. We were hiring back then a lot. So we went through a period of time. I was an FTO for a year, and we had a recruit. Had a recruit with me for every shift for a whole year. Not the same recruit, varying recruits. Mm-hmm. But it was a lot of fun. But there's a burnout factor there. But it was a lot of fun helping train new people. And again, I was excited to work here. And at the time, we hired some folks from some other agencies, much like we do now that were coming on board that had some experience. So it was fun watching them come on board here and learn about us. And some of them brought some skills that I hadn't seen before. So I learned from them as they learned from me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun. I enjoyed doing that. So after that, I went over to the Omega Squad, the Street Crimes Unit, for just a little bit. And then I saw a posting come out for burglary. So I decided to put in for burglary to be a burglary detective. And I got picked or accepted, I guess, if you will, or picked for that position. So I left patrol. Was my first official transfer was to the burglary and pawn unit. So I went up there, and I'll probably say this a lot in this podcast, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. Actually, I've never had a job here that I didn't thoroughly enjoy, so I say that a lot because I just love what we do. I love this. I deep down, I love this profession. But burglary was fun. I worked up there with a good group, and that was the first time in my career since FTO when Kurt Romanowski showed me how to do long-term investigations, and that it was extremely rewarding, and it still is to me to this day when you're able to put a case together, when you're able to find fingerprints, or you're able to get that first lead. And in burglaries, it's high volume. So you have, a neighborhood or an area where you'll have, sometimes 15, 20, 30 cars broken into, a lot of valuables stolen, things stolen out of cars, and you're trying to put that together and then you get that first lead, or you get that print hit, or you get that piece of evidence, or a patrol deputy may have FIR'd somebody, and you're looking at the FIRs, which is a field interview report, Ashley.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to ask.
The advocate for the common man.
Yeah, there you go. So you get that FIR, and then you start looking at that person's background, and you're going, what are they doing out walking around at 2 o'clock in the morning that piqued the deputy's interest? And then you start getting, and then when it comes together, you're like, okay, this is my guy. This is my guy. Okay, this is cool now. Now we're going to go get him and maybe do some surveillance. So I really enjoyed that. And then at the time, we worked a series of cases. We were getting hit back then with boat motors being stolen at a from high-end marine stores. So we had a pattern back then where we'd have a van stolen, and then we'd have a boat store hit in the same area, and they'd clear out all these high-end outboard motors. So all of us had cases in that. We had, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 of them. It was like a habitual thing that was going on. We'd have a stolen van, and then the motors. And the vans kept getting recovered down in Hialeah, down near Miami is where the vans were being recovered. So we surmised that the vans were being used to transport these motors, and it was all tied in together because they were in the same proximity. So long and behold, one night our patrol deputies caught one of these guys in progress, and got behind one of the vans that had just been stolen and got into a short pursuit. They end up abandoning the van. They arrest a couple of the guys, and then they end up impounding their one of their vehicles that they were using. So they were using this Ford Explorer, which they're coming up in the Ford Explorer from Hialeah. They'd steal a van, scout out the marine store or the marina, steal the motors, load it in the van, and then the Explorer and the van would go back south. And the motors were actually going to Central and South America. It was a pretty large ring up and down the East Coast. So that was the first big case that I'd ever worked, where we worked with FDLE, we worked with the FBI. We ended up putting a tracker on this Explorer, and then they got out of jail, came and got the Explorer out of impound and took it back to South Florida. So we took turns. We split it up with all the other agencies, and we took turns doing surveillance on this vehicle down in South Florida. So I got to go down to Miami a couple of times, got to work with the police down there, got to work with the FBI. And these guys were hitting all up and down the East Coast. They're hitting as far up as Virginia, all the way down through the Keys. So it turned out to be a big case, but that was the first time that I got exposed to something that was that large and that involved. And I really enjoyed it. And then getting to travel and do surveillance and trying to do surveillance down there was challenging too. Being from out of the area, and we didn't have radios that worked as well as they do now. And it was fun. The FBI was involved. They had an airplane up in the air. The FBI ended up taking the case, and it was called Operation Blue Water, and we worked it with the FBI for it's probably about 6 months before they made a bunch of arrests on it, and it was pretty cool. But so I thought at the time, I'm like, this is super cool. I want to go continue to be a detective and do that. So I was up in Burglary for a little over a year. We just finished up that case, and then I started thinking, I'm young. I wasn't married at the time. Do I really want to be inside? Even though I enjoyed the work, is this what I want to do? And I'd always wanted to be in the Marine unit. I grew up, I mentioned my father earlier, being a police officer, but we were also boaters. We grew up on the water, boating a lot. My father, as a side job, had a charter fishing business. Oh. We used to charter fish up in Maryland and all, so I always enjoyed boating. And I said, I'm in my 20s. I'm young. Do I want to be up here with all these detectives? And there was a spot that opened up in the Marine unit. And one of my friends at the time was out in the Marine unit. I went out and did a ride-along in the Marine unit. And we just worked this Operation Blue Water case. It was a boat-heavy case. We were down in Miami. It was a little Miami Vice theme to it, if you will. We're down there. It felt like we were Crockett and Tubbs running around down there doing surveillance. So I said, the Marine unit looks like a lot of fun. And I don't mind working weekends and all. So I went out and did a ride-along, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put in for the Marine unit. So I kind of took, which a lot of people at the time considered a step backwards, because I left the detective division to go out to the Marine unit. But I did, and that, I'll say it again, was a great experience. I had a complete ball out there. I was out there for almost 5 years. Enjoyed every minute of that job out there.
And you still assist with the trainings that they do.
Sure do, yeah.
Yeah.
I still try to get out there as often as I can. I tell the guys, whenever I see them, I say, I got to come out and ride again. I actually have a Marine unit uniform that I had to make me up, so when I go out there, I can wear it.
Blend right in.
Yeah, I enjoy that. That job is really underrated for what those guys do out there. I tell people all the time that job is 90% skill and about 10% guts at times. Those guys go out there and operate those boats and that equipment in adverse weather conditions, and there's not a lot of backup out there.
Right.
And people's lives are on the line a lot of times counting on us. And that was the first time in my career that I got exposed to rescue type work. It's not all law enforcement. It's a lot of times it's fishing somebody that's going to drown if you don't fish them out of the surf line in the Gulf. You come across those situations, or you have somebody seriously injured by a boat propeller, and you got to pick up a fire crew and get them, and they're bleeding, and you're heart attack victims, all kinds of things.
Back then, was there still like the extensive tryout process there is now, or was it a little bit more? Yeah,
there was. Yeah, you had to drive.
So it wasn't like, hey, you want to be an FTO?
No. It was quite competitive to get in out there. You had to I actually put in twice before I got out, accepted, if you will, to go out there. And you had to go through an interview process. You had to do a boat tryout. There was a swim test. It was challenging. It was. You had to demonstrate that you could drive a boat, and not only just drive a boat, but drive a police boat, which is different. Recreational boat driving and police boat driving are two different things. Like I said a minute ago, recreational boating, you kind of get to choose when you're going to go out and choose your conditions and choose what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. When you're driving a police boat, you got to go. You got to go and do it.
So was the expectation that I guess that's what you're saying, is that you had to already know how to operate a boat and operate it well at that time?
Not really. And a lot of people have gone out there over the years with very little boating experience. Yeah. So we used to tell people, and I think we still do to a certain degree, is that we want you to understand the basics of a boat, but we're going to teach you how to drive a police boat. And we're going to teach you the skills. And there's a lot of emphasis out there on training, especially at the beginning.
Yeah.
And we do different scenarios and different things out there to teach you how to drive these boats in adverse weather conditions. And this time of year, during the winter, was some of the best training that we did, because you just have these cold fronts that would move through that would create these sea conditions offshore that were extremely rough. We go out there and throw buoys over or floats over, different things, and practice fishing them out and fishing different things out and teaching the guys how to surf the boats and how to pick your winds and pick your waves and pick different things. And then when you're trying to fish out somebody, you can get in peril pretty quickly if you don't know what you're doing. So we spent a lot of time, and I got transferred out there in the winter, which was a good time. So I started out there in January. So we got a lot of that training knocked out before the summer season. And I enjoyed it. Like I said, it's a great job out there, and the training is second to none. A lot of people just see those guys kind of bumping around the boats and wave to them, but there's a lot that goes into that job.
Yeah, I think the biggest eye-opening thing when I've been out with them a few times is just the backup piece. Like you're out there by yourself, and if something breaks bad, somebody can come, but it's going to be a minute, and then they got to get to you.
Yeah. So, I was out there one day. I was by myself on the south end of the Dunedin Causeway, and I stopped 4 guys fishing on a boat. There's fishing, so I pull up, I tie up to them, just do a fisheries check, which a fisheries check is just to make sure they had their licenses and didn't have short fish and things along those lines. So we're having a conversation, no big deal, and I get their 4 of their IDs. I run them, and one of the guys has got a warrant. And when you're in a situation like that, you're tied up right alongside of them, so they're hearing the radio traffic coming across the radio, just like you are. So the dispatchers are good. They say, are you 1012? Yes. One of the subjects has a 60, so they're using codes.
Right.
But these guys were pretty coy to what was going on. So now it's 4 against 1, and I'm tied up to them. So I remember thinking to myself, well, let me see if I can make this 1 against 1. So the guy with the warrant, I said, hey, I forget his name now, but I said, hey, can you step on my boat for a second? Because what my plan was is have him step on my boat. I was going to untie from their boat, and then it'd be 1-on-1 versus 4 against 1. Mm-hmm. So when I asked him to step on the boat, he says, why? I said, well, I just need to talk to you. He goes, I'm not stepping on your boat. Well, now I look up, and because the deputies had been listening, the causeway's now got a couple cruisers on it. So they're watching me as I'm talking to this guy. So now the guy definitely knows what's up. And the boat was a pretty decent boat. So I thought for a second, I looked at the guy, the captain or the owner of the boat. I said, I'm going to be real blunt with you. Here's the deal. I said, he's got a warrant. He's going to step on my boat. And if not, I'm going to drop the throttles. I'm going to drive your boat and this boat right up on that rocky shoreline right there. And those deputies right there and I are going to arrest him. So I said, those are your choices. So he goes, as he grabs the guy, goes, get on that boat. Because he didn't want his boat destroyed.
Right.
But it just happened to be the situation where we were, and there was rocks in front of us, and the deputies were on the other side of the rocks. I said, well, we're going to do this the easy way or the hard way. We're going to destroy some equipment, and you're going to go to jail, or you're going to step on here and go to jail. And that's what the guy ended up doing. But you have to be out there in that unit. You have to be creative like that. You have to think. And then your backup, sometimes you're by yourself, and your backups on a good day might be 30 minutes away.
Right. Or at least they're heads up listening, though, so they're there for you.
For sure.
5 years in Marine?
5 years, yeah, 5 years.
And then what possibly could lure you away from that?
Yeah.
So I got married during that time. I had met my wife during that time, and I got married. And my wife moved to Florida when she was a baby, so when she was 1. So she grew up, in essence, in Florida and very much liked the water, the beach, being outdoors. And being in the Marine unit and working the holiday weekends and working out there in the summer, you get out of your truck, your air-conditioned truck in the morning, and you're not back in air conditioning sometimes for 12 hours in the summer. So when you get off work, the last thing you want to do is go on a boat, go to the beach, be outside. You really want to go to an ice skating rink or an air-conditioned mall. And so we'd gotten married while I was out there, and she has a Monday through Friday, a regular job, if you will. So after 5 years, I'm like, okay, this is not fun anymore. Mainly because when I was off, I didn't want to do anything but sit in the air conditioning.
So did you ironically leave the Marine unit so you could spend more time on the water?
Yeah, actually, I think but I took a break. There's a little bit of a burnout. It's funny, and we talked about it when I was out there, and I think sometimes it holds true to this day, is that a lot of the guys, when they go out there, they end up selling their personally owned boats because they don't use them for that reason. And then it happens, I think, to a lot of us or a lot of them, a lot of the folks that have been out there. And then when you're done working out there, for me, 5 years, I didn't want a boat for a while. I was just tired of it. You get kind of burnt out on being on the water. Mm-hmm. So you take a break, I guess. I just took a break. It wasn't intentional, but I took a break, if you will. So I saw a position, another thing that I'd always wanted to do. I enjoyed working with kids, and I had good relationships with the police growing up. So I saw that there was a posting out for a school resource officer. So I said, okay, this is cool. I'd always thought I said earlier, I always wanted to be a police officer or a deputy growing up. But I had a great high school experience. I played sports growing up, played football, and I had a good relationship with the police growing up. So I always thought that if I didn't become a police officer, I would like to have been a teacher and been a sports coach in the schools and teach. So always kind of on my police bucket list, if you will, or deputy bucket list, I wanted to be a school resource officer. So I saw a school resource officer position open up. I knew it was going to be at a high school. So I put in for that and was transferred into school resource and then was assigned coming out of the Marine unit to Bogaciega High School.
You sure were.
Yeah. Were you there?
Uh-huh.
Oh. Did you know me there?
You're in my yearbook.
Oh, did you bring it?
No, I didn't. I should have.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in one of my yearbooks.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So that was in 2004?
Yeah, that was I think my freshman year.
Did we have any contact there?
No.
Okay, that's good.
No. I was a straight A,
Nerd.
Yeah. I was in the medical magnet.
Okay.
Yeah.
You weren't General Pop down there.
No, I was not. I was not General Pop.
Medical magnet. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's a small world.
Yep.
I run into people from there often at times.
Yeah.
Some, unfortunately, when I was at the jail, hey, Dep Danzig. I'm like, hey, they call me Dep. Short for deputy. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? You remember me? I was at Bogey. I'm like, oh, what happened? You're in here.
Yeah.
But it happens.
They probably let their cat run at large.
Cat run at large.
The cat was at large. They just didn't turn the light on.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
So I liked SRO. It was fun. I was partnered with Stevie Thomas, who's still in the SRO program. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was down there for 2 years, and then that second year, I decided I was going to take the sergeant's test. We had we were going through a period of growth back then, and then we hadn't made promotions. There was a period of time where we hadn't made promotions in a long time. And
how long? How long's a long time?
So when I started, we were in a period of time. I don't think we had made promotions in 10 years.
What?
Nothing?
Wow.
Yeah, at one point.
How?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah, it was crazy. So yeah, in 1996 when I started, I mean, the sergeants were just these old people. I was young, but they were older people, and there just wasn't a lot of upward movement then. And it just seemed like we were in a period of stagnation. Even the year that I started, going back to 96, I think I was one of maybe 10 that were hired that whole year. It was very different then. So we went through a long period of time without promotions.
Like was there movement?
Yeah, like was there
transfers?
transfer? Yeah.
Yeah, transfers,
but just
yes,
not promotions.
but not a lot of promotions. And you had people that just were in these positions for a long time. And a lot of the sergeants were just older people. They were just old. And then they were good sergeants, but they'd just been in those positions for years and years. And they retired out of those positions eventually. We didn't have the growth and the expansion that we had in years later. So we were coming up on a period of time back then. So it would have been probably started right at probably 2000-ish. 2001, we started kind of breaking out of that. And we had a lot of retirements. So then we started the agency started putting out notifications for sergeant's tests, and they used to do them over at Seminole High School in the auditorium. So, as a deputy, I'm watching people go take the test, and then lists are coming out, and then we started making promotions again. People were getting promoted. So that's back to me being at the school. I had seen some folks that I'd worked with and people that I was looked up to and things that had gotten promoted. So, I'm going to take the test and just see what it's about. So I spent, and again, I was a newlywed then, and my wife and I didn't have any children, so I had some free time to devote to studying outside of work. So I studied for a whole year for the sergeant's exam. I took, spaced it all out, mapped it all out, and put the effort forward. And then ended up getting a good score and ended up on the list. So back then we had a ranked list. I think when the list came out, and we had a matrix system back then, so you had your test score, and then you got matrix points for different things. So I ended up, when the list came out, I think I was 20th, which was fine, because I knew I had some matrix points coming up. So in one day, I collected some matrix points for tenure and a few things. I jumped from 20th to 10th. At the time, it was Sheriff Coates. He promoted a couple people. The next thing you know, I was 5th, 6th, and then I got promoted right at the time. So my wife was pregnant at the time, and then I got promoted right after my daughter was born. So it was kind of it was a special time. My daughter was premature, so she was in the NICU. So I was out on FMLA, and I was driving home from visiting her, and Sheriff Coates called me on my cell phone. We had cell phones then. We'd evolved the cells. And, back then people, and they probably still do it now to Sheriff Gualtieri and probably to me, who knows, but people would prank call you and say they were the sheriff. And a lot of people had Sheriff Coates' voice down pretty good. So it was a Friday afternoon, and it was in December of 2006. So it was the Friday before Christmas. So I'm driving home from the NICU. My daughter's in the NICU. So the phone goes off, and it's the sheriff's office. It's the inside line. So I answer it, and it's Sheriff Coates. And I said, I'm thinking to myself as he calls me, well, all my friends know that my daughter's in the NICU.
Yeah, they're not going to screw with you.
No one's messing with me. So he promoted me, called me, and promoted me to sergeant. So it was cool. It was cool. And I tell people this. I've been fortunate enough to be promoted, obviously, since then. But the first time is always the best time. That first phone call, when you're a deputy, and that first time the sheriff calls you and promotes you to sergeant, it's like, wow, this is cool. So I was fortunate. I got promoted to sergeant, and then from there I went to Midnights, North County. I hadn't worked in North County in a long time. I hadn't worked Midnights, and that was a ball. Like I said earlier, it was great experience. Loved every minute of that position. I had a good squad. And Midnights is just a different animal in a sense that there's no traffic and there's no heat. And a lot of the people that you see out there at night, most of the people out there in the middle of the night are out there for a nefarious purpose. And it's just fun. You go out there and just look for bad guys and respond to calls, and you're not dealing with heat and traffic and lines and occasionally a mosquito.
Now, so that was obviously your first role as a supervisor.
Yeah.
and you had, and of course, you'd been here a minute. The idea of having like a deputy that's been here for 10 years becoming sergeant is like unheard of, right? If you're wanting to be promoted, so that was kind of a different time.
Yeah, I've been on 10 years at the time.
So, but as a new sergeant, like, because obviously leadership is something you got going on, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So what is that like as a deputy stepping into that role? You obviously know how to do the job, but now you kind of have to step back and just kind of help support your squad.
Yeah.
What is that dynamic like? What was that like for you?
So it was challenging because I had never been a corporal. Just the way things had shaken out along the way, I'd put in for corporal at different times. So we didn't put an emphasis back then on the corporal program like we do now. So I literally went from deputy to sergeant. So my first day, the lieutenant was off, and I came into the sergeant's office at North District, and I didn't even know how to approve reports. I didn't know how to update the schedule or any of those things. So one of the other sergeants came in and kind of had to start showing me the ropes. But I remember thinking at the time, when you first get promoted to sergeant as a deputy or as an employee, you're worried about what you have going on, your cases, your activity, what you're going to do with your day, backing up your fellow coworkers if you're working the street, or helping your fellow detectives if you're a detective, or even in the Marine, who you're going to ride with that day, if you can pair up, where you're going to patrol, what you're going to focus in on. Well, as a sergeant now, you have to focus in on everybody and keep an eye on everybody, and make hopefully make decisions to keep everybody out of harm's way. And I remember at the time thinking that this is a pretty serious position because, especially out there at night, you're having to make judgment calls as a supervisor, and a lot of times on high risk stuff. So it's challenging, and there's definitely a learning curve. We see it. I saw it then. We see it now with folks when they first make sergeant. Some people, I think, are just born and step into it, and others it takes them a little bit to get used to that, and having to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of the people that you have working with you. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with the group, and I had a good group back then. We had a good group. I had a good lieutenant back then. We just had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun working out there at night. It's a weird breed of people that you deal with, and the folks that work midnights are weird in a good way too. It's almost you get used to sleeping during the day and being up all night and stuff like that. So back then, my daughter, this is not a funny story, but my daughter was a baby back then. So I went right back to work after I got promoted. She came out of the NICU. So my sister-in-law was gracious enough to come over and spend the night with the nights I was working with my wife, so she wasn't home alone with the baby. So one night at like 4 o'clock in the morning, my wife calls and I answer. I said, "Hello, what's going on?" She goes, "Your daughter has not slept at all tonight." I said, "Well, I'm at Denny's right now with my squad." I said, can I call you back? And then she hung up on me. Remember the old school phones when someone would hang up and you just hear that click? I was like, ooh, I got the chills when she hung up on me. Like, oh, man. She's gotten no sleep. She's got to work tomorrow, and I'm having a moons over my hammy right now at Denny's. This is not good. That's not good. But those times were fun. My sister-in-law helped us out a lot back then, my wife's sister, and she would spend the night at the house and help with the midnight feedings with my daughter and all that. So being a new parent, a new sergeant was
a lot going on at once.
Yeah, it was fun.
But being a sergeant also is parenting, so.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, for sure.
So what was next?
So I moved over to evenings, and the FTO sergeant coordinator at the time was a gentleman by the name of Jason Lyons. He called me and said, "Hey, would you like to be an FTO sergeant?" I said, "Yeah, for sure." So he goes, "I got a spot on evenings for FTO sergeant." So I moved over to evening shift as FTO sergeant. And that was, again, rewarding. I enjoyed that. I got to get kind of back to my roots with the training. I enjoyed being an FTO. And I took a lot of satisfaction in that. We had a good group of FTOs. We were going through a period of hiring back then. We were having recruits come through. And I enjoyed watching the recruits come through and our squad getting to teach them kind of the ropes, how we did business. Working evening shift up there in North End was fun. Of course, you had a lot of traffic, but the call volume was always good. So I did that for a while, and then eventually moved to day shift. We bidded back then, and then somebody wanted evenings, and I got bumped to days as FTO sergeant. So I was FTO sergeant on days up there for a couple of years. And then one day, the captain called me into his office, And he said, hey, you like what you're doing? And I said, I do. I said, I got good days off. I got a great squad. FTO, I'm just loving it. Yes. He goes, well, do you want to be FTO sergeant forever, or do you want to move around the department? I said, well, I've got a long way to go. I don't want to be here forever. He goes, well, I'd like you to go out to SRO and be a sergeant over there. And I said, all right. I said, well, I'm enjoying working the street. I'm enjoying catching bad guys. I said, all right, I'll think. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll think about it. I'll do it. So I did, and that was a lot of fun. So I didn't expect that to be as much fun as it was. So I went over to there as a sergeant. So I kind of went back to where I'd come from. That particular time, I had the North schools. So there was 3 sergeants, I think, at the time, with the way we had the county divided up, and I had the North schools. So I worked over there, and that's really it was before Stoneman Douglas, but obviously after Columbine. So we just kind of started down the road of an emphasis on school safety. And we did a lot of training back then on single officer response and recognizing threats in the schools. And I enjoyed that because we got to partner with the schools in a good way. I got to form relationships with some of the principals in the different schools and really be an ambassador for what we did. And working in SRO is fun because it's not all bad stuff. It's not all bad kids. There's a lot of good kids that go to our schools that we have great relationships with, and you get to spend time with them and see them. And there's a lot of good people that work in the school system. So I enjoyed both my stops there, the first time as a deputy and then again as a sergeant. So that's, you may keep talking so I go from there. Yeah.
No, you're doing great. I don't even know why we're here because you can just go.
Yeah.
But
I've been a lot of places. I've done a lot of things.
It's got to be.
Oh, that was your goal.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's got to be some level of like, oh man, like when you're getting pulled from places, you're having a good time, but then you just throw yourself into the next thing, and it's not that big of a detriment, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then again, being a new father at the time and having the freedom, the flexibility of SRO, meaning that you had weekends and nights off for the most part. You could take some time off during the holidays. It was good, and again, I enjoyed the staff that was in there. The deputies did a great job. They all had great relationships in their schools, and it was just a good time. There was just no issues. And then we had a lot of the big football games back then. I remember working the East Lake and Tarpon game, which was a big deal back then. And when we hosted it at East Lake, we had a bunch of deputies working, a big crowd. I remember one of the games was a sellout game. And, tickets were sold out, and it was just fun. School spirit and the relationship we had with the students. It's much like they have today. It hasn't changed. It's just from a policing perspective, it's just a fun job. It's fun. It's not all bad stuff. And there's times where you had to arrest kids or deal with a disorderly
community,
parent.
so you can kind of it's just a microcosm of something else. You can kind of still see more of the positive
for sure.
A lot easier than being out there on the road.
So I was happy as could be over there, and then I got a phone call from Glenn Lubin at the time, and you guys probably know Glenn. He's retired, still teaches, and he's retired captain from here. So Glenn called me, and I'd known Glenn for a long time. We had been work friends for a long time. So he called me and said, hey, I'd been out at SRO now as a sergeant for something was in my second school year, so just about 2 years. And he called me and said, hey, we got a position coming open in internal affairs, a sergeant's position. Yeah. That was the same reaction I had. I said, oof. So I told him no. I said, no, I'm good. I said, I like SRO. And I said, I don't want to see, deputies get in trouble. I don't know if I have the stomach for that. The reputation of IA, and I don't know if I have the stomach for it. I said, I love this place. I love our guys and girls, and we do such good work. And it's just like, I don't know if I want to be part of seeing people get in trouble. And he goes, so I told him no. And he goes, well, think about it. He said, it's not all that. He said, probably 75% of what we do is highlighting the good work of what our staff does. And I said, well, no, that's what PIO or public relations does. You guys are the bad news police. So I said, no, I'm good. So we got off the phone. So he called me the next day. He said, no, did you think about it? I said, yeah, I told you yesterday, no. He said, no, I really want you to think about it. So we spent about another hour on the phone, and I said, all right, I'll think about it. So he calls me the third day, and he said, are you in or out? I said, I'll put in for it. All right, you beat me up enough about it, so I'll put in for it. So I went in there, and at the time I was in there with Daryl Spiva, George Brochi, Lubin, myself, Joe Garrett's, who's still here, a lot of the guys I mentioned have retired. And that was, again, I'll say, like I said about everything, it was a great stop. I learned a tremendous amount about the agency because you work cases throughout the agency. And I'd never really been exposed to corrections at that point. So I got to work some cases out of corrections and some cases out of fiscal. And I worked a case out of purchasing, so I learned about that. And Glenn was right. The bulk of the work that we did was documenting what our staff did, and that, yeah, we did use force, and the force that we used was appropriate. And there was times, unfortunately, where we had to, investigate misconduct. Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of times where we had to, the sheriff terminated the employee, and those were tough. But I always felt like it was handled appropriately. We handled it appropriately. We were professional with the staff member, made sure that they were treated fairly and were exited appropriately. Mm-hmm. And went on from there.
Yeah, so. I think a lot of people, we obviously don't talk a lot about AID because it's not
like
the typical. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, we PR, PIO specifically, when those bad things happen, we do put it out. But people, we touch on a little bit with some of our public education programs. Like, this is a law enforcement agency within a law enforcement agency.
For sure.
And there is no stone left unturned with what we're doing. So a lot of, there's a lot of rhetoric out there and a lot of conversations about, police investigating police, it's, whatever. But that's nonsense because, as supervisors here at the sheriff's office, we have the opportunity to sit in to an administrative review board hearing where they kind of talk through it with the member there. I mean, it's the most harsh. I wanted to crawl under the chair when I was in there, but it is a harsh process, and there's a lot of, I feel like everybody has a fair shot. Everybody has every opportunity to tell their side of the story, but if you're not going to take accountability for what you did, it's just not going to go well.
Yeah, and that's true. And I tell people this, we have to investigate allegations of misconduct, and we have to do it fairly, impartially, and transparently. And if somebody comes in afterwards and says, we want to take a look at that file, and we give it to them, and it needs to be transparent, and you need to be able to sit down as a member of the public or a member of the media and read it and say, okay, they can investigate themselves. They can do it properly. They can get to the right conclusion, and they can police themselves. And I tell people, if we can't police ourselves, then someone's going to come in and police us for us, or police for us, and that's not what we want.
Right.
So I think we have a history of being able to demonstrate that we can do it correctly, we can do it fairly, we can do it transparently, and we do that. And if our members are wrong, they're wrong, and when they're right, they're right. And I think Sheriff Gualtieri and Sheriff Coates and Sheriff Rice before them, the other sheriffs I've worked for have all operated that way. If we're wrong, we're wrong, and we're right, we're right. And that's a lot of what AID does is, they investigate and they make those decisions up there. If they document it out and what we did was appropriate, then it's appropriate. And if not, then the members will be held accountable for what they did. Mm-hmm. And that's really the part of it. And I agree with us being able to investigate ourselves. I do, because there's nuances to this job that if you just don't know, how can you investigate? It'd be like me trying to investigate a medical malpractice case and say that a doctor didn't perform surgery correctly. I don't know how to perform heart surgery. So how do I know if it was performed properly or not?
Right.
So it was good. That experience up there opened my eyes to a lot. I got to learn a lot about employment law and see the disciplinary process. And that really kind of laid the foundation from my career going forward, because I learned all about that. I learned about it's a lot easier to deal with problem employees or deal with employee issues, not necessarily problem issues, but just any issues on the employment side once you've worked in that unit.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine. I mean, you know, and you probably have a better understanding of how on the employee side too, if you ever have to go through one,
Yeah, for sure.
Just balances everything out.
But luckily, luckily as a whole, we don't have a lot of issues here. Sure, every agency has issues. There's things that come up. There's things that have to be looked at. But by and large, we have a great agency, and we don't have a lot of cases that come through there. We don't have any corruption cases or anything like you see in the movies or TV or anything like that. We don't have a corrupt agency or a rogue agency. Most of the stuff that comes up is relatively benign things that anybody else has. Now, we sometimes get some wild allegations that come through, but really what's been a benefit to our members is the body cameras and the dash cameras, because these people at times will call in with a wild allegation, and we're able to look at it within seconds and go, well, that's not what happened.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I know it was kind of a tumultuous journey to body cams for us, but as you know, as technology changed and it kind of became more applicable, it was huge. We were just talking to Citizens Academy about it last week. It was like, yeah, I mean, they really do more to get us out of trouble and to clear allegations than anything else, because it's indisputable. You know, the days of somebody whooping their phone out saying, "Hey, we're recording this." It's like, okay, us too.
We are too.
For sure.
I'll
be honest with you. And you guys have seen me. I mean, I wear mine. Obviously, I don't wear it in the building, but when I'm out, even to and from work, if I'm in uniform or I'm out in public, I have mine on. I wouldn't want a police in this day and age without it.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't. It's not a gotcha thing. I like having it running, and it helps us. And really, is when you're handling a situation or a call, or you're dealing with somebody, it's running, so you can go back and watch it and say, what exactly was the statement, or what exactly did they say? And this helps you with your accuracy. And plus, the technology is so great that, I mean, short of smelling it, you're there when you watch these films. And then if we have an incident where we have multiple cars and multiple deputies there, each car has a dash camera, and then each deputy has a body-worn camera. So you may end up having a dozen or more angles of something, and and you can multi-screen it and play it back. And you really, I mean, short of smelling it, you're there,
right,
for the most part. So it's very good. It captures a lot of evidence for us, and I tell you, it captures a lot of the heroic work that our people do, and it amazes me sometimes when I see it, and I watch our folks doing this heroic stuff, and I'm like, right on. That's what we sign up to do. And sometimes I watch it. I couldn't be more proud of what our folks have done when I see it. I'm just like, that's what you did it. You know, like I said a few minutes ago, there's about 90% skill and about 10% guts, and you showed the 10% guts right there, and it's good. So I think they're great. Like I said, I wear mine when I'm out of the office. It's on, because you just never know, and it captures a lot of evidence for us, a lot of good stuff, a lot of the good.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always
Looking
perusing, looking for good stuff, that we can put out, because there's so much of it that does happen.
Yeah.
So you make it to lieutenant at some point.
Yeah, so
you do the shift commander thing, which is probably also one of your favorite jobs, how'd I guess?
Yeah. So it's funny, whenever my wife got pregnant, I got promoted early in my career. So she was pregnant, and I decided I was going to study for the lieutenant's exam. And then when she was pregnant with my son, my second child, shortly after he was born, I got promoted to lieutenant. And then when I got promoted to lieutenant, we used to have a relief shift, which was a great shift in a sense, but it was terrible on your body and personal life. So the relief shift back then is you worked 8-hour shifts. It was Sunday night and Monday night, you would work 8 hours, midnight shift. Then you would double back on Tuesday. So you got off Tuesday morning at 8. You double back and work 3 to 11 Tuesday evening. Wednesday evening, you'd work 3 to 11. And then Thursday, you'd double back and work 7 to 3.
Jesus.
So you had 2 double backs with only 8 hours in between. Wow. So by Thursday night, you were gassed. It was like you're going to sleep at like 6 p.m. So I did that.
Is that like the rite of passage for all new lieutenants?
Back then, yeah. Back then, you made lieutenant, you went to patrol, and you're on relief. And until there was another opening, you were just the relief lieutenant. And the relief lieutenants back then didn't have any personnel assigned to them. You were really just the caretaker. So, the midnight shift lieutenant was off Sunday, Monday. The evening shift was Tuesday, Wednesday, and the day shift was Thursday, Friday. So that's how we did it. So I enjoyed that because you got to see all shifts. You got to work all 3 shifts. And each shift had its different personnel and its different things going on. But then from a sleeping perspective, it was...
From a sleeping perspective, not so much.
Yeah, so it was not good. But I did that for almost a year, and then a spot opened up on midnights, and I went to midnights permanently up in the North End. So I was back on midnights in the North End as a shift commander. That's a theme, but that's a great job. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
I think that's a job that's really underappreciated
for sure,
because and even the public just doesn't realize. It's like, yeah, I mean, you got the sheriff and his command staff, but as far as what's happening on the streets of Pinellas County, north of Gulf to Bay or south of Gulf to Bay, there's one person calling the shots and dealing with all the shenanigans.
Yeah, and there was nights where the other lieutenant would be off. So the way that we do it is you have a lieutenant working north, lieutenant working south. So like you said, north of Gulf Bay and south of Gulf Bay. And at the time, Mike Ring was the South Lieutenant, and I was the North Lieutenant on midnights. And we were on permanent midnights, so we didn't rotate like on the 12s like they do now. So there was times where Mike Ring was off, and it was like me. I remember the first night, I was like, well, I'm the highest ranking person working midnights. I'm like, this is, okay, hopefully it's a quiet night. And there's times where it's like, okay, there's no one else above you that's working. You know, I got to wake somebody up in order to elevate something. So there's a tremendous amount of responsibility in that position, and we still view it that way now. When we put a lieutenant on midnight shift, even in the role I'm in now, I make a point of telling them, remember, you're the man on midnights. You got to make good decisions and think things through and take care of your people. Mm-hmm. You make a bad decision, you can impact a lot of different things. You know, during the day, there's a lot more people working, a lot more people that you can bounce stuff off. But midnights, in the middle of the night, you're a midnight shift lieutenant at 3 o'clock in the morning. You got to make a decision. So,
Any memorable situations during that time?
We had a house fire up off of Sewell Road. It's one of the few times in my career I activated the SWAT team. So I was in read-offs. We had read-offs, and I at the time wore an earpiece. So I got the earpiece in, and myself and the sergeant, Bill Bird, were sitting in read-offs at the time. And we're listening to a call come out over in Squad 7 off of Sunset Point and Sewell Road. There's that cemetery over there. Mm-hmm. So there's a call of shots fired, and there's multiple people are calling, and they're hearing shots, but they don't know where it's coming from. So deputies get on scene. There's a lot of radio traffic about shots coming, and they think it's in the cemetery, but they keep hearing rounds going off, but they can't identify where they're coming from. So Bird and I are listening to this, and the read-offs are kind of wrapping. I said, I said, you going to head down there? He said, I'm going to head over there. I said, I'll be down there in a minute. Let's see what's going on. And then a lot of radio traffic. So we get down to Sunset Point Road, and the deputies had closed off Sunset Point Road and kind of set up a little bit of a command post. So I get down there, and that was before we had all the fancy downlink equipment that we have now. Back then, we had an overgrown tablet that had these antennas on it, and it would downlink to the helicopter camera, and it was in black and white, so it was like the early version of the downlink system for the helicopter. Well, Bird at the time had one of those, like one of two that existed. So he had called for the helicopter, and he's trying to view what they're seeing. And we're thinking this whole time that's coming from the cemetery. So we're trying to figure this out. We're on the phone with a bunch of different callers. It's like, I'm hearing it from the north, I'm hearing it from the south. And while we're standing there, you're just hearing rounds go off. So the helicopter gets overhead. We can't figure it out. And then VCTF at the time, Violent Crimes Task Force, happened to be listening. They get up there, and Paul Halley was the lieutenant. So he gets up there and goes, hey, what do you got? I said, we can't figure this out. I said, I think it's coming from the cemetery. I think there's someone in the cemetery shooting. He goes, we're going to get out on foot. We're going to go into the cemetery and see if we can see, start doing some peeking. And I said, we got a kind of a 360 on this block range, and it's in this block range. So next thing you know, the helicopter camera view wasn't working. We didn't see anything. And then Halley gets on, and I can hear the shots in the background. And he goes, activate the SWAT team. I'm like, say again. He goes, activate the SWAT team. We got the guy. He's in a house, and he's firing out the front window. I'm like, okay. So I activate the SWAT team, and I called Captain Higgins, who was my captain. I said, I just activated the SWAT team. And he goes, all right, what's going on? I said, there's a guy in a house. He's firing out the front window. I said, I don't know what's going on, but I said, Halley's up there, and I said, to activate SWAT. So then Halley comes back on, and he goes, disregard, send an FD, the house has gone up in flames. So the guy, turned out, long story short, the guy it was an older couple that owned the house. This was their nephew. He was an adult. The older couple were gone. He was house sitting. He'd been drinking all day, found some guns, and he's just shooting out the front and back window. Oh. And then he decided once
as you do.
Yeah, as you do.
In
then
Florida,
he decided at one point to light the house on fire.
Oh. Okay.
So he lit the house off and then came running out. And when he came running out, our deputies were nearby, and they downed him and grabbed him and drug him away from the house. The house burnt to the ground.
Nobody else inside it.
No one else got hurt, and he didn't get hurt. But he burned his, I think it was his aunt and uncle's house to the ground. He wasn't a bad guy. He just was drunk and found some guns.
Night.
And yeah.
Just drunk and found
That was
some
probably
guns?
the most memorable call, because it probably took us almost 2 hours to figure out where the shots were coming from. And we're on with all these callers. And I'll tell you, our communications center did a great job that night. I went in a couple nights after and talked to them, because they were on with all these callers, and they didn't get off the phone. And we just couldn't figure out where the shots were coming from. But you could hear them.
Right.
Like, they weren't like, bam, 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 bam. It was like you'd hear a shot, then silence, and you'd hear a shot, and then silence, and then we had on the laptop screens, we had maps up, and we're trying to pinpoint. Okay, did you just hear that one? Okay, where'd that come from? And of course, it was the middle of the night, so it was dark, and we're right beside that cemetery, and then you could tell that it was, gunfire. It wasn't fireworks, and it took us a while to sort through all that. But before Hallie retired, we joked about that night or laughed about that night because I said, "That was funny." We got on the radio. It was kind of quiet. He goes, "Activate the SWAT team," and I'm like, "What? Activate who?" Yeah. And then I called Hagen's back, and I said, "Disregard on the SWAT team." I said, "The house has gone up." He goes, "I'll be down there in a few minutes." I'm like, "All right." The house burnt to the ground.
That's crazy.
Some people have no business getting drunk. Just
for sure.
If that's what you are going to do.
Some people just call their ex. Some people shoot guns and start fires.
Well, could you imagine you have your nephew house sit and you come back and the house is burnt to the ground and he's in jail?
And your ammo.
Yeah, and your ammo's gone, your guns are gone, your house is burnt to the
sorry,
ground. He's in
I
jail.
drank too much. What?
Yeah.
So you, speaking of Hallie and VCTF, that's where you ended up.
Yeah, so not long after that, I'm asleep at home. We work in midnights, you're sleeping during the day. Phone goes off, and Sheriff Gualtieri had just gotten into office at that time. So the phone goes off, and it's Sheriff Gualtieri. And I was a pretty good sleeper during the day. I got adjusted. So I remember having a conversation with him. I remember him saying something about 410s. And he was moving me, but I didn't know where at the time. I didn't understand.
Because you're half asleep.
I was asleep. So I hung up, and I thought, I rolled back over, and I started to drift off again. Then I woke up, and I thought, did I just dream that? Or not? I'm looking at my phone, and I saw that I had a phone conversation. So then I'm awake, so I get up, and I make myself a cup of coffee, and I'm waiting for the memo to come out to see where I was going. Because it said 410s. I'm like, what's on 410s?
That's all that you caught?
That's all I caught was 410s.
Oh, no.
Going somewhere. No idea where.
Yeah. So then the memo came out shortly thereafter, and it said, Violent Crimes Task Force. And Hallie was being promoted to captain, and I was going down to being transferred over to Violent Crimes Task Force. So I left midnights and went over there. I was over there for about a year. That was another great job. Probably from a purely policing perspective, like going after bad guys, that was probably the best job I've had, just for going after the worst of the worst. That was at a time when there was a lot of guns on the street, a lot of illegally possessed guns on the street. And we were just humming. We were paired up with the St. Petersburg Police Department, and we were just humming and going after the worst of the worst in the worst areas of the county. And we were taking 2 to 3 guns a week off of criminals. And it was just, and that when I took it over from Hallie had started that unit. And it was supposed to be a temporary project, if you will, a temporary assignment. And the foundation of that is they had taken a group of St. Petersburg officers, a group of Pinellas deputies. We deputized the St. Petersburg officers, and they formed this task force. So they had a sheriff sergeant, a St. Petersburg sergeant, and then a sheriff's lieutenant. And it was kind of a mixture of undercover personnel and uniformed personnel. And the way that it was set up is that we worked one problem at a time. So you weren't spread out like a traditional policing model where you have deputies spread out, and it's one deputy.
Was everybody all in on every issue?
So if we were going to stop a car, the whole unit stopped the car, right? If we were going to check out with people on a street corner, the whole unit checked out. So we were set up, at the way that it was set up was that we were self-contained. We usually would have a K-9 with us, and we were set up to win every encounter, if you will. And when I say win, it's like the bad guys wouldn't run because they were overwhelmed by the amount of people.
The number. Yeah, the number of people, yeah.
And if they did try to run, we had some fast guys that could run, and we had K-9 with us, and we could set our own perimeter, and we could set it. We could handle. We were self-contained. We could handle it. And then the guys in both agencies that were on the task force at the time were a lot of SWAT guys, a lot of tactical type guys, and they worked together every night. Every night that they worked, it was the same group working every night. So when I got in there, Hallie had been in there about a year. I took it over from him, and it was a well-oiled machine. And when I say that, they could decide that we're going to stop a car, and there was very little radio traffic. Everybody knew their role. Everybody knew what to do. And we could have a car stopped and everybody out and in custody in seconds. It was almost watching like a symphony, if you will. It was just precision.
A lot of people speak really highly of BCTF. Just so many people we've interviewed that talked about it, and that makes perfect sense. Why? Because, there's a lot of gratification that comes from that, I would imagine.
It was, and the guys out there were just great guys and girls. I mean, it was guys and girls both, and it was just the personality of the people just made it fun. We had a lot of laughs at what we did, and we did a lot of things, and it was just fun. You know, we were able to just do things, and then we made mistakes, and when we made mistakes, we laughed about it and learned from it, and it was just a tight-knit group, and it was all type A personalities. So imagine coming to work every day, and you really have your dream team. You're working with, when I say your dream team, it's people that are just you have to hold them back. They just, any profession could have these type of people. It's just your go-getters, your runners, you got to slow them down, you know, and it's just that's what that whole entire unit was from both departments. And it was good too, because I'd never worked around, but never with the St. Petersburg Police Department. And I got learned a lot about that department, and a lot of respect for what they do and how they do it. And we got to work together, and it built a lot of bridges that still exist today from a communication standpoint and a working together standpoint. And it really, those relationships still exist. And I still talk to the guys and girls from that unit that are down at St. Pete, and we still communicate and share information when it's appropriate, and it's a good thing. So it was good.
So that was your last lieutenant assignment before you got the next phone call?
No. So I'm having a ball out there. I'm working nights.
Time to go.
Yeah. So I'm enjoying that position. I'm asleep again, believe it or not. And the sheriff calls me. And once again, I was in a deep sleep. And I wasn't exactly sure, once again, where he said I was going. There's a pattern of this, I guess. Two times it's happened. But I heard him say Monday through Friday and day shift and I need you type thing. And I said, okay. So I got off the phone, memo comes out, and I was going back to IA now as a lieutenant. And that was a culture shock. That would be like going from, like when someone does a polar bear plunge, it was like that. Cause that feeling, because I say that because I went from a high energy unit where we're in a tactical uniform. We got UCs out. We're going after people, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, Gregory Johns. We're pitting cars. We're getting guns. We're going after robbery suspects. We're just doing all this stuff. And then the IA lieutenant's job is very much an office-driven, paper flow-driven job. So remember the first week I got up there, I replaced Glenn Lubin, who was a lieutenant. He got promoted to captain, and I go in there, and I'm like, whoa. I sit down, and then I, at the time, would always have my radio on my desk and be listening to what's going on. And I still had the VCTF channels on my radio. So that first workday they were back to work, I got the radio on, and I hear them all checking on, and they're going out, and they're setting up on a car. And I'm sitting there with a stack of paperwork, and I'm going, oh, my God, how did I end up back here?
So when the sheriff calls, are you allowed to say no? Does anybody say no?
Yeah, you can.
You just don't get that call again, ever?
Yeah, you can. No, and people do, and they do for various reasons. And people have said no to me. You know, I've contacted people before and said, hey, we need a favor. We need you over here. And they've said no and given a reason. So people do, and they can. I didn't. Mainly probably because I was asleep, but
is that why he called you at midnight all the time?
Probably.
Yeah.
No, he called me during the day. I was just asleep because I'd been working.
Yeah.
So he was calling me during a reasonable hour. I was just the one that was asleep because I've been working during the night. And I think he said to me on the first time, he said, well, I was going to leave a voicemail. I'm like, I heard the phone, so it wasn't a big deal. But, you know, I didn't say no. I mean, I could have, but, you know, I always like to move around a little bit, and VCTF was fun. I can tell you, my wife did not like me in VCTF at all because I was working long hours. I was working at night. She was home with the kids. And then the whole thing, you know, out there, and I come home in the morning. I'm like, oh, we got 4 guns off the street last night and wrecked 3 cars and caught 4 armed robbery suspects, you know, from a safety perspective.
Right.
But then I would
like,
tell her.
Don't tell me.
Yeah, exactly. But I would tell her, I'm like, well, I'll tell you this. I am safer with this group than I would be out there by myself.
Anywhere else,
working. Yeah, because I mean, we did everything as a group. And if there was, you know, something going on, there was 10 of us there. So you were never alone.
Right.
It wasn't like that, you know, police officer pulling somebody over on the desolate highway in the middle of the night. You know, we were a group, and we moved everywhere as a group.
Right.
So I was, it was a culture shock going back to that world, but I embraced the change of it. I could have said no.
Right.
But I embraced the change of it. So I was up there again now in the lieutenant's role. So I had a group of sergeants up there. Back to the IA, not much had changed like we discussed before. I was just in a different role. And then, so I got promoted to captain out of there. And what had happened with that story, if you will, is we had a sergeant, unfortunately, that was resigning in lieu of an investigation. And we were still in the old building, so we had the two buildings. IA was in the 400 building, and then the main sheriff's office was in the other building. So I was over in the main building and helping this sergeant out process, and my phone goes off, and it was the IA major. We had a major in IA at the time. Called me and said, "Hey, are you still here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm next door. What's up?" He said, "Hey, the sheriff's over here. Can you come over here real quick?" So I thought it had something to do with the IA case we were wrapping up. So I literally jogged back over because I thought we had screwed something up on the paperwork or whatever the situation was. So I jogged back over to the office. I come up the stairs, and the sheriff's in the major's office, and sheriff says, "Let's get out of your office." I go, "Okay." So we out of my office, door goes closed, and sit down, and the sheriff goes, "So how's it going?" And I'm out of breath. I'm like, "Well, excuse me, I'm out of breath because I just ran over." I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Well, I'm going to promote you to captain." I said, "Oh, okay, cool, captain. Yeah, where?" He goes, Central District." I'm like, "Perfect. I appreciate it." And that's kind of how that went. But it was kind of funny because I ran over there, and it was like the furthest thing from my mind at that moment.
You're out of breath. And
I was out of breath. But the good news was it wasn't the middle of the night.
Yeah, there's that. You actually heard what he was telling
you.
I
heard what he said, yeah. So I got promoted to captain at Central District. Again, loved every minute of that position. And that was a really unique time in a sense because we were still doing some hiring. And back then, we were kind of coming out of the recession, if you will. So we consolidated some things. So as a Central District captain, I had the police academy and field training under me. So we were doing hiring back then.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were only captain in patrol before you went to major, right?
Yes.
Because I want to talk about that one because you get promoted to major over IOB.
Yep.
And your only IOB experience was burglary.
Correct.
So something that's unique, obviously, about working somewhere like this, you're obviously getting moved around at the sheriff's whim.
For sure.
But you can be put in situations where you ended up at the jail, too, as a colonel. But
Correct.
you're put in situations where you literally have no idea or have very little knowledge of how stuff actually works.
Yep.
And people approach that in different ways here. How do you navigate that? I mean, you are literally the boss. And, because I think we've all been in situations where, some new person comes in, that you're working for, even perhaps a position that you're passed over for, whatever. But, how do you work through that?
It's challenging. And I think you build relationships and you do a lot of listening and a lot of show me how you do this type stuff. And a lot of what do you think?
Right.
We'd sit down. So like when I got promoted to major, I'd never worked homicides. And now homicides under me. So I remember the first couple murders we worked. We were at a point in the murder investigation. The first 8-10 hours into it, it comes time for the first roundtable of what do we have? Do we know who did this? Do we have a clue? Do we have a pointer? And a lot of what do you think? And what do you think? And what do you think? And just listening and paying attention. And then, at times you don't have to make a lot of decisions because it's just vetting through it and listening to what the guys and girls are telling you. And then when you do that, the decisions a lot of times come easy because they have the experience, they know what they're talking about, and then that experience then builds and then builds. And once you've done one, you do another one and another one. It just kind of starts to build from that point. I've always viewed it as this. I've never been the smartest person in the room, and I've always believed in just surround yourself with good people and let them do their job, let them figure out, let them teach you, and you learn a lot along the way. And I've been blessed to work with some great people. I've never personally solved a homicide as a case agent, but I've watched it done and watched the folks up there do it, and it's like, okay, they know what they're doing, and let me help support them and let them show me how to do it. And then a lot of times when you do that, the decisions come pretty easy in a management position. It's not as challenging, I guess, at times.
Mm-hmm.
I think where people run into problems is where they go into a role like that and they think they have to be the boss. They have to make the decisions and they have to tell you what to do. Like if I stepped into your guys' world, I don't know how any of this equipment in here works. You show me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you need something, you're going to tell me, hey, by the way, while you're here, we could really use a new whatever. Okay, well, why? Well, because this doesn't connect to that. Okay, that makes sense. Well, let's go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of coming in and trying to say, well, when I was on a podcast,
Yeah.
I would have used the
Right.
Mega Mixer 300.
Right.
That's where people, I think, run into problems.
Yeah.
We got a lot of good people here that are subject matter experts on what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just let them do it, they'll do a darn good job at it.
Mm-hmm. So you invest all this time learning how to do homicide investigations and all this. You get comfortable, and then guess what? And you also only have 2 kids, so there weren't any other kids that came with promotions.
Yeah, no more kids, which is good.
So you get shipped to the jail.
Yeah, and that was a fun conversation, too. So the sheriff called me, which wasn't unusual, and
Right.
said, could you pop up to my office, which as the IOB major is not unusual.
Mm-hmm.
We're working high-profile cases and things, and sometimes he would have a question or want an update. So I pop up there, and he says, hey, we're going to make some moves. It's okay. And he says, I'm going to move you out to the jail. And I said, the jail? He said, yeah, the jail. The jail. Yeah, the jail. He's looking at me, and I said, you mean like, and I point like to the east. The jail.
Were you hoping there was some other jail?
Yeah, I'm not sure we're talking about the only one we have, the one out there off of 49th Street. And he says, yeah. He's looking at me like, are you something wrong with you? That's what he's looking at me. And I said, you realize I've never worked there. I never worked in the detention side of the house. He goes, yeah, I know. And I said, I'll be honest with the sheriff. I said, I can't remember the last time I was at the jail. It's been a little while. It's been a hot minute. He goes, yeah, I know. You'll figure it out. I said, all right, thank you. Appreciate it. I think. So I go downstairs, and there's a theme here, too. Paul Halley, who I'd followed into VCTF, was now the jail colonel at the time. So I go downstairs and I call Hallie. I said, hey, have you talked to the sheriff? He goes, yeah, I understand you're coming out here to replace me. I said, I am. I said, I'd like to come out and see you this afternoon. He goes, great. Yeah, I'll be here. You free? Yeah, great. So I got one question to start. He goes, yeah, what's up? I said, where's your office? So I don't know where your office is. So he described how to get through the checkpoint to where his office was. And then so I went out there, having never worked out there. And that was probably one of the, if not the most rewarding assignment I've had here. And I've told others, and I just had this conversation with the new colonel out there, Garvey, before he went out there, that's an untapped great place to work. Untapped secret, I guess, so to speak.
From the law enforcement side, anyway.
For sure, from the law enforcement side, yeah. I couldn't have been more impressed by that group out there, the work that they do, the way that place operates. I don't think people understand how big it is. A lot of people, and when we do some of the public tours out there, and the citizens would come out of the public tour, they would say, I had no idea all this was back here, or how big it is. And it doesn't look that big from the road, but it's a big place, and there's a lot going on, and it's a 24/7 operation, and it's really a hotel, if you think about it, with 3,000 guests a day.
Yeah.
And 9,000 meals.
9,000 meals, yeah. And you've heard me say it before. If we were a restaurant, we'd be the largest in Pinellas County, and there's a lot of logistics that go into running that place, and a lot of movement, and it's all on timing, and it's all on, and part of the challenge is that your hotel guests don't want to be there.
Right.
So
There's that.
There's that, yeah. And there's some very, very, very bad people that are there that I sleep comfortably at night knowing that they're there, that they're locked up. So it's challenging. It's a challenging environment. The deputies out there, I tell you what impressed me out of the gate out there is the camaraderie that the deputies have out there. Yeah, they remind me of VCTF in a sense, is that if there's a problem, there's a group. It's not one deputy, one problem. There's a group. If there's a fight out there, there's a group. If they're going to move a high risk inmate, there's a group. They work together, and there's very much a sense of camaraderie, teamwork, esprit de corps, if you will. They celebrate birthdays and holidays, and it's very much like an old school police department used to be before take-home cars and different things, and technology entered into it. And there's just some good people out there. They do, and the work that they do, I think a lot of times goes unnoticed by the public, but it's important work, it's valuable work, and they do it quite well. And I used to tell, I'd walk the halls out there, and I would say, this is the best damn jail in the country. I used to say that a lot. It was kind of my mantra. Probably shouldn't say damn, but I really felt that way when I worked out there, watching those folks work and then learning about corrections and getting to go to some conferences and some things, and they just do a good job.
Yeah. I'm sure that was another, obviously, situation, just like IOB going out there, but getting out there and about and talking to the troops is...
Yeah. And I got to interact a lot with the corrections response team, which is also probably an unsung group around here that a lot of people don't realize, but we have a corrections response team, which is like the SWAT team for the jail. And the way that they're structured out there is you have team members on call 24/7 that are on shift. So it's a little bit different than SWAT. Like we could have a SWAT activation, and a lot of those guys and girls are coming from home. Well, with CRT, we always have CRT members on duty. So there's a CRT activation. They come off their post and they go to the CRT room, dress out, and then go deal with the situation. So I got a lot of respect for those folks. I got to see them work. I got to go to some of their training and see that they do it. And they could have 2 or 3 activations in a week, and nobody would be none the wiser of it from a public perspective. And meanwhile, they've dealt with, a violent inmate that is not following instructions, is flooding their cell and wants to fight, and they got to go in and extract them from the cell and deal with them. So it's a different environment for sure, but those folks do a great job.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a favorite for Citizens Academy and stuff when they do their demonstration because it's terrifying.
Well, because there's, and a lot of your citizens have just never been there.
Yeah.
They've never been in that environment, and there's not a lot of television shows that feed drama. There's drama cop shows like your Law and Orders and things that focus in on what, and then obviously the show cops and different things that focus in on that. But there's not a lot of shows. There's a few, but not a lot that show what goes on inside a jail. So that's why I say those folks out there a lot of times don't get the recognition that they deserve, but they do a great job. And I enjoyed. I didn't want to leave at the time. It's funny too. My wife and I at times have reflected on my career, and she said to me a couple of times, she said, "Yeah, I think you were your happiest or you enjoyed the most working at the jail." And I said, "Yeah, I think you're probably right when we talk about different things." She used to come home with a smile on your face from the jail, and I said, "Yeah, I just enjoyed it because it was fun. It was the camaraderie and the people and the work that they do.
It's something totally new. Like
Yeah.
You're probably still learning something every day up to the day
For
you
sure,
left.
for sure. I felt like I was in a different department, and it really is. I mean, you're out there on 49th Street, and it's just different, and it was just fun. And to your point, the learning part of it was a lot of fun. I got to learn what corrections is and how we do it, and it was cool.
So from there, obviously, you come back over. You were back on IOB for a minute.
Yeah, for a little bit,
and then to ACD.
Yes, assistant chief,
which is a little bit of a jump there.
For sure, yeah, for sure. So I started off assistant chief, and I started off on the law enforcement side, if you will. So I had IOB and patrol again. I did that for a couple of years. That was a jump for sure, but not entirely different than being a major, being a colonel. It's just another step up.
And because those are relatively new positions in the big scheme of things in the agency, because you just had the sheriff, chief, and then straight to majors.
Yep.
So the assistant chief's kind of in there just to kind of help balance it out a bit and kind of be another layer of filter
for sure,
and just kind of help with that workload because it is a lot. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, of course, it's more significant now as chief, but you figure all the personnel that y'all have in those areas, there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I said this yesterday. I don't know how back then the chief deputy did it with just the majors. And I guess we've evolved so much with technology and we've grown so much, and there's so much going on here in a good way. When I say going on, I mean we have our hands in so many things, and there's so much that we do that I don't know how they did it with just the chief deputy, the sheriff, and some majors.
The role of chief, I mean, I feel like I've been on the journey with them, just trying to get through all of it. But I mean, that's got to be kind of that's the ultimate. Well, not quite the ultimate, but you're one step away, one heartbeat away from the sheriff's office, huh?
Penultimate?
Yeah, penultimate, I guess. So what does the chief deputy do?
Well, so this is my second week. So,
well, but you know,
what have you accomplished so far?
You worked directly for a chief before, so you got an idea.
So you really, it's this is a big place, and there's a lot that comes through, a lot that we do, and really what I'm learning so far is I get information on just about everything that we do, and I'm kind of the last pass through before stuff goes to the sheriff. So I get a lot of information. I go through that information. I make sure that it's correct and right before I get it over to the sheriff. Make decisions, keep him in the loop, and then some stuff comes down from him to me. Hey, I need you to handle this. I need you to handle that. They say that the title of chief deputy is you're responsible for the day-to-day operations of the agency, and so far that's what I'm seeing. We have a lot going on and all the components, and in one way, shape, or form, it either comes via email or by phone call or by stops to the office. It comes through my office, and we just talk about things. We make decisions. We go forward, and then really the sheriff's doing his thing, and he's busy at here locally and sometimes at the state national level.
Sure.
So part of my job is making sure that stuff's getting done around here, and then keeping him in the loop of what's going on, and just dealing with projects, and it's just a lot. I'll say this: it's a lot of stuff that comes through there. I'm learning, but the good news is we got a good group of assistant chiefs and majors, and a good group at the executive level, directors, that all are competent and do their job. So so far it's been good. There's everybody's doing their thing, and we, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, is responsible for the public safety, and it's that's a big responsibility, and there's a lot that goes into that. It's a 24/7 operation. We deal with serious situations, serious people, life and death situations. Our deputies are out there on the front lines protecting the public. So, when Chief Comar and I and now Chief Carey go and speak to folks, we try to bring a little bit of lightheartedness to things and not be so rigid in what we talk about and what we talk. We try to make some jokes and give everybody a chance to breathe when we talk. It's serious business what we do, and there's times to be serious, but there's also times to have some laughs, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah,
it's not a bad thing at all.
As we kind of wind down, I'm curious about your perception of deputies today, with the time that you've been here, what a good deputy looks like, but more so like what your perception of modern law enforcement is, or specifically here at the sheriff's office.
That's a good question. I think this generation sometimes gets a bad rap. The younger generation, the 20-year-olds that have come on, they're technology driven. They don't want to work. The work ethic's not there. And I really feel the opposite. At least we've been lucky in the deputies, and both on the detention side and the law enforcement side. Not just the deputies, but the staff, all the staff we've been able to bring on. We got some good, hardworking, tough. And I don't mean physically tough, but just get her done people here. And so I always believe in. I'll get back to that in a second. But first and foremost, I say this all the time: treat somebody the way you would expect to be treated. And I can remember, just like I described earlier, the Clearwater police officer that pulled me over and wrote me that ticket. It was almost 30 years ago now. I can still remember how he looked. He had a mustache, the glasses he had on, the car he was driving, and just about the whole conversation we had. Because luckily, I've only been pulled over a few times in my life. And that's the case for most people. So if you live in this county and you have charged us, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, with protecting you, and you call 911, what level of service, what level of professionalism do you expect in return? So if you're that person and you've called 911, what do you expect? Do you expect someone to be empathetic, to listen, to help you, to solve the crime, to push your car out of the road? I tell people all the time, and the public, call us. We're here. People sometimes, I don't want to bother you guys. No, bother us. That's why we're here, right? So, and I think the group that we have does that. I think it's a good thing. I think we have a good group of staff members here that really care. And if you look at what we've been able to accomplish under Sheriff Gualtieri over the last 14, 15 years with crime rates and programs and things that we've done and and I'm excited about the future, places that we're going and things that we're doing. I think we've created that environment here, and I think it's a good thing. And I think the deputies and the staff should be proud of what we do, what we accomplish every day. You know, I tell people we have a historian that comes through, and the historian does a great presentation on the history. We've been around for 113 years, I think, this year. So, and the historian does a great presentation, and she collects a lot of pictures. And in your guys' calendar this year, there's pictures of old timers that did old things and wrestled alligators and did these things. But the group we have working here now, if you think about it, if you've been with us since 2000, you started off, you lived through the only pandemic in modern times. So think about how things were during the pandemic. So we had to police and run, and I was at the jail at the time, running the detention facility where you have 3,000 people living together through a pandemic, and all the social distancing that had to go into that, and then the fear of COVID and the masks and all that went into that. Then we come out of that, and we're barely at the tail end of that, and we have our first line of duty death in our history, right? So then the same group, the same generation, we come out of that, we have our second line of duty death. We're out there on the interstate highway, and we haven't even gotten the suspect in custody yet, and a hurricane briefing comes through from the National Weather Service that says we have a storm coming. So we get the suspect in custody on that case, and we got to put that on pause and put funeral planning on pause and do a hurricane, get through the hurricane, and go back and do a line of duty death funeral. So fast forward to 2 years later, and we just did back-to-back hurricanes, the worst that we've had in modern times. Mm-hmm. And that's in 4 years. What I just described to you occurred in a 4-year time span, 5-year time span. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you think about the group of folks that have been with us for these 5 years and what they've been able to accomplish. I would take the group we have working for us right now up against any group that's come through this agency since our inception.
Yeah.
And they're tough. When I say tough, I don't mean physically tough. I mean, they're just tough, hardworking people, and this staff does a great job, and they've been able to manage all those situations, and most recently the hurricanes. Mm-hmm. You know, working in those conditions and seeing the flooding that we had, and the deputies out there, you know, up to their waistlines in water, up to their shoulders in water, fishing people out of flooded homes. And there wasn't an ounce of back down from anybody here. It's like
while their own homes were in.
While their own homes,
as
correct.
You know.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, and also beyond all that, and that's cool to hear you say, but I mean, beyond all that, policing is a lot different than it was. It's more complicated. I mean, there's more tools, but it's more complicated. Sure. Even in 1994, when you walked into the pass office, you weren't planning on being a social worker, a guidance counselor, mental health professional, all the things that have been thrown at you over your career. That's all relatively new.
Yeah,
for back in the day, you couldn't just handle things the way things used to be handled.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when I started, you had a baton and some pepper spray. And
mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what you needed.
Yeah, for sure.
You did go, because I know all about this, because you had a great presentation for Citizens Association, but the FBI Academy, which was a big thing, a fun thing. Yeah. But you were talking about getting excited about what we do here and coming to work. I got a text from you one day while you were at the FBI Academy.
Correct. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to be selected to go to the FBI National Academy. So back for the summer of 23. So that's a whole story in and of itself. I was somewhat out of shape when I got the selection to go. And part of going up there is you have to meet certain physical requirements. And there's a whole physical portion of the FBI National Academy. It's the only leadership academy in the country for law enforcement where they have a physical component to it. There's a big physical fitness component to it. So I was getting in shape and went up there for the summer of 23, so it's 10 weeks. So one of the classes I took, it was called Seminar on the Law Enforcement Image, which for the slang term of that, they called it up there, was the PIO class. But the class was much more than that, and it was a very sought-after class. It was like they told you when you got accepted, like when you go to register, like pick that one first because it fills up, and everybody wants this class. So it was a very good class, and I got a lot out of it. And they do the class is taught in like a television studio, and they have a podium, and it's all about not just the traditional PIO stuff, but all the stuff that you guys do too. So they have you do Facebook, mock Facebook posts. They have you do an interview, like a surprise interview. They have you do a press conference, all these different things. What they did at the start of each class, the two instructors, at the start of each class would go into Google and bring up stuff that was going on in the country, and then they would lead into different trends and different things. So it was the second or third class. I'd only been up there about a week, and they started talking about trends in law enforcement, and they throw up a slide, and it's your guys' slide from the 56 podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, if anybody's familiar with this agency, they just started this podcast. We listened to the first couple ones. I think the first one you had was Detective Chalmers.
Chalmers, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So they had listened to Chalmers, and they were talking about your podcast. And they said, is anybody, and up there you wear an academy uniform. So they said, is anybody familiar with this particular agency? So I raised my hand. I said, those are my people down there. I said, yeah, those are my people. I said, so it was pretty cool. And then I got a lot of questions about it afterwards, about the podcast and what you guys had done and how it was set up. And then you got some listeners out of that group. So it was cool. It was a cool moment when I was sitting there. I was like, this is pretty cool.
That was cool. That was a good text to get.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be on an FBI watch list. So
yeah, no, but it's
you're probably on another one.
Yeah,
Ricky.
you're probably right. Yeah. So when you're not working,
yeah,
what do you like to do for fun?
So I mentioned earlier that my wife likes the outdoors. So as a side note, my wife's a prosecutor here in the 6th Judicial Circuit. So we're like an episode of Law and Order at home.
Is that all you talk about over dinner?
So people ask us that, do you talk about work a lot? And believe it or not, we don't talk about work at all. It's really odd, in a good way, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's healthier to be able to shut it off.
It really just is. And last night was a prime
life.
example. I got home late, and she got home late. She said, how was your day? I said, good. How was your day? Good. And we just moved on to other topics. It's just like, I think it's, for her and I, when we get home, it's like we've been people-y all day. We just don't want to be people-y anymore. It's like we don't want to talk about like work anymore, and we just talk about other things. And we're blessed with two great kids. My daughter's a senior at high school. My son's a freshman. They both play sports. Both of them are in travel sports organizations, so we spend a lot of time with them. We take trips with them on for sports and other things. So we when I'm not at work, we try to, if we're not at a sporting event with one of our kids, we try to be at the beach or on the water. We have a boat. We spend a lot of time at the beach. We have a golf cart. So we get down to the beach a lot. We get out in the boat a lot. We like to travel. Really, we try to disconnect ourselves from here, which is from our work, not just from here, but from her work also, which is a good thing. But it's good. So we like that traveling and being outdoors is probably our favorite thing. And my wife and I are both, I guess, foodies in a sense. We like to try different restaurants, and we really enjoy living here. We plan on retiring here eventually. This is not a stop for us. We like living here and like all that Tampa Bay has to offer. We try to take advantage of it all. It's really a special place to live, and there's so much here to do and see. So we try to take advantage of all that.
Yeah.
You said your wife's a prosecutor?
Yeah. We've kind of had similar paths in our career. She's been out there a long time. And then there's been some times where when I was IOB major and she has been the on-call state attorney overnight, and my phone's gone off. We've had a homicide. So I'm answering the call, and then I'm getting my wits about me, getting ready to get up and get dressed. Then she wakes up and starts asking me questions. I'm like, well, what's up with the question? She goes, well, I'm the on-call state. I'm like, oh, all right, well, here's the deal. She goes, a few times she's like, well, you better not need a warrant because I'm not going to write one. And I'm like, then there was one time we were out of the scene, and I forget what scene it was. We were out of the scene, and it was one of the ones the sheriff had come by. It was in the morning. And at one point, the sheriff's like, has anybody briefed the state on this? I said, yeah, I talked to her before I left the house. He laughed. She said, we better not need a warrant. So, yeah, our work actually crossed paths at times. It's I got a no-file letter from her one time when I was out at VCTF. Sent a no-file letter through, and I brought it home. I'm like, really? I said, you're embarrassing me in front of my people. Can we not talk about this? It's a good case.
That's awesome.
Dang.
Yeah.
You're incredibly positive. You're reminding me a little bit of Sergeant Fortner, just the way that you talk about the agency and everything, and it's really inspiring. Despite like what law enforcement sees day to day, like you see, like you said, the worst of people. You see a lot of that. How do you keep that mindset that you have? I'm just curious because
I guess it's just how I'm I guess for me personally, I guess it's just how I'm wired. Even being a father, being a parent, like my kids have learned this from me. It's like I'll tell them. I said, insert problem here. I'll say to them, okay, if you see me upset, then you can be upset. If I'm not upset, it's not that big a deal. We'll figure it out. We'll work through it. I'm just eternally optimistic that things will work out and people are good. And that's how I feel about our staff too. It's just, I deep down, I love people. I love coming to work. I love what we do. This has never been a job for me. It's just always been who I am. And I get excited about it. I get excited coming to work every day. There's really, I tell people I really had 2 bad days at work in my career, and it was the days that we lost deputies. Short of that, I've never really had a bad day here. Now, some are better than others, but I've never really had a bad day at work. And I think knowing and working with Jimmy Fortner, I think he's just wired in a sense like I am too. He's a people person. He likes coming to work. He believes in what we do, and the way that he interacts out there with the staff and even in the inmates. I mean, the inmates even love him. I mean, it's like the inmates will come into the jail and they want to see Jimmy. I mean, so Sergeant Fortner, it's like, who does that? Who wants to go to jail and see somebody? But I just enjoy what we do, and I enjoy the people, and I like seeing people succeed. I get excited when we make promotions, and I was sitting with some of the new sergeants that we just made the other day, and I just, I remember being new, and I was excited for them because I'm thinking about all that I got to do since I've made sergeant. They're on the front steps of that now. And it's like, I'm just excited for them because it's like, it's going to be a heck of a ride. You're going to get to do some amazing stuff and mold some people. And it's just fun. It's just this is a great profession. You get to help people. It's unpredictable, and you get to see a lot of good and bad. But even in the bad, there's always good with the bad. It could be a horrible situation, but you get a lot of satisfaction and pride in making it better for somebody else. Or for me, it's catching the bad guy, especially if it's an elderly victim or someone that was harmed through no fault of their own. It's like, and you get to catch the bad guy. It's fun.
We also try to offer all of our guests an opportunity, like if there's something you can share with the public that you want them to know to make your job easier or make everybody's jobs easier, what would that be?
That's a good one. No, lock your cars. No, everybody says that.
Yeah, we've heard that one a time.
No, I think that question. I've been asked that question a few times. I got to ask that question during the hurricanes a lot. People said, what can we do for you guys? We see you working, and I tell you what goes a long way. And I think it goes a long way with the deputies, and it's always gone a long way with me. Is when someone comes up to you and just thanks you. Mm-hmm. They give you a handshake, and they said, "Hey, we saw your guys out in my neighborhood." And most recently during the hurricanes, I had so many people just from different community groups and people that I know and circles that I travel in come up to me after the storms and say, "Your guys were great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You were in my neighborhood. You were here. Your guys were there." And I think it goes a long way. And I remember after working in the days and weeks after 9/11, and people just coming up to you and just thanking you. Mm-hmm. You couldn't get out of your cruiser after 9/11 without somebody coming up to you and shaking your hand and saying, "Thank you for what you do every day." So I think sometimes that gets forgotten, but the deputies here on both sides, the detention side and the law enforcement side, get dressed every day and come to work, and we ask them to do a noble and dangerous thing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people take that for granted. Mm-hmm. And, from a public perspective, just to thank you. And I think it goes a long way. It does with me. It always has with me. And when someone does that, if I'm out in uniform and someone walks up to thank me for my service, I always make sure I stop and take a second and acknowledge that and say, "Well, thank you for acknowledging that." And always reminding me to call us if you need us and how are you. And
right.
I think that's important.
The human side.
The human side of it, for sure. For sure.
Well, Chief, we really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us. It's great to hear the experiences you've had, your perspectives. Because I think it's, there's a lot of folks between the sheriff and our deputies. And, you've been in a lot of those roles, and it's great to get some insight and tell some stories. So appreciate you taking the time. Laura, it is your time to do your thing that we do at the end of every episode.
My thing. Well, despite what I said before, we don't have a live call-in line, although maybe we should work on that.
Could be
fun.
He'd be calling if Komar was on.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Oh, Komar would be blowing the line up right now. I can tell you right now.
But lacking that, the best way to contact us, if you have any thoughts about our show or any recommendations for future guests, is at lets56@pcsonet.com. That's LETS56@pcsonet.com.
You can also catch us on Instagram, 56 Podcast, spelled out. Another opportunity. So thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll catch you next time.